Please welcome back to the stage the National Fair Housing Alliance's Janell Byrd-Chichester in conversation with New Jersey Attorney General Jennifer Davenport.
Welcome, Attorney General Davenport. We are so very happy to have you here to bring in the state perspective on this issue. I would like to take a moment, though, and just give you a little bit of Attorney General Jennifer Davenport's background. She became the acting Attorney General of New Jersey on January 20th of 2026, following her nomination by Governor Mickey Sherrill, who was confirmed, and she was then confirmed by unanimous vote of the New Jersey Senate in February of 2026. So she's fairly new to this role. I guess we've both been in our roles about a year and a few months. As New Jersey's Chief Law Enforcement Officer, Jennifer Davenport oversees over 42,000 state and local law enforcement officers and 8,000 employees of the Department of Law and Public Safety. The department has responsibilities that touch on nearly every aspect of life in New Jersey. Its sweeping responsibilities include investigating and prosecuting crimes, representing state interests in court, and enforcing strong consumer protection and civil rights statutes. Attorney General Davenport came to her position after a long career in public service with law enforcement. She served for 4 years as New Jersey's first Assistant Attorney General and Principal Law Enforcement Advisor, where she worked with law enforcement leaders and prosecutors across the state to promote public safety. She previously served as an Assistant United States Attorney at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of New Jersey, including as Chief of the General Crimes Unit. She has an illustrious career in the private sector, and in her early career, she clerked for the Chief Judge, John Bissell of the United States District Court for the District of New Jersey. She graduated from DeSales University and received her Juris Doctorate from Seton Hall University School of Law. So we're very happy to have Jennifer with us today, and I want to start the discussion kind of to build on what we're learning in the conference, and ask her kind of what's the role of the state? How does the state Attorney General's office fit into this broader ecosystem of actors that influence and determine what's going to happen with AI? And what I mean by that is we talked yesterday about the role of foreign nations, the international or global actors on this stage. We know in the United States, there's the federal government, there's state government and all the components of that. We heard also yesterday about county officials and the role of counties and cities in making decisions that affect AI. And of course, there are the individuals, the consumers. And this is all packaged, as it's packaged in this conference, is looking at how do we make sure we have responsible, human-centered, accountable structures for the operations of AI. So Attorney General Davenport, or may I call you Jennifer?
Please do.
Okay.
Even Jen.
Jen, okay. All right. Can you share with us how you see, what's your vision for how you think states best fit into this ecosystem, and in particular, how Attorney General's offices fit into the ecosystem?
Sure. So much like anything that state attorneys general do, right? We're thinking all of the time about public safety. We're thinking all of the time about how to keep, in the case of New Jersey, 9.5 million residents safe every day, and all the tools that we have in order to do that. So this is not unique in that respect. In fact, the responsible AI, right? It's responsible in everything we do, right? That's what we want to make sure that the industries that we either regulate or what we do from our own departments is done in a responsible, informed, accountable, fair way. So to that extent, it's no different. And we recognize that AI and technology as a whole is a great tool, right? It's a great tool to enable us to do our jobs better, to enable lots of different industries to do their jobs better. And the innovation that is there can really be harnessed for a lot of great things. So the role really is putting those two things together to make sure that, like we do across the board, we're ensuring that the right safeguards are there, in making sure that we can either work with folks who, if there are more tools that we need, whether it's working with folks in the legislative branch to make sure that we have the tools we need to go after when we think that the safeguards aren't there, or if there are opportunities for us to make sure that we're holding folks accountable, those who want to use a technology, whatever that may be, in a way that's harmful for folks. Whether it's consumers or ways that we would harm our kids, that we're making sure that we can get to the heart of how to not have that happen. So there is an enormous role for state attorneys generals and attorneys general in this space. And I think that we're really kind of stepping up to that in different ways, holding companies accountable like Meta and some other places where there's been perhaps that feeling or that sentiment that you are protected. We are doing these things to protect you, but it turns out that it's not happening, right? Especially when it's marketed to kids that way. Or on the flip side, when you have areas like RealPage and the lawsuit that New Jersey brought there, which was collusion in housing and for rates for housing. So we have those tools at our disposal, but when we don't, it's really helpful for us to be able to work with the other entities that you've mentioned to make sure that we're all kind of doing it together. And I would say to the room of people that are here, knowing that you're from all different industries, government and industry and all different spaces, the way we do it best is to learn from each other, right? Because then we can understand how we can make it better and safer for everybody, and how we can also understand what education can happen from our end as well.
And so you mentioned, kind of learning from each other. Can you talk a little bit about how, I'll say, the attorneys general across the country work together and may work together in the AI space, work collaboratively?
Yeah, again, it's really like any other issue. You learn best when you see best practices from other places, when you get to see how folks are working, perhaps when it comes to the areas where their enforcement tools or regulations may be working in a particular area, or lessons that they've learned perhaps from different symposiums they've done or different stakeholder meetings they've done. We exchange ideas about that, but we also think through ways where it may be more practical. And certainly we've seen this this has a bipartisan issue in many ways, right? Where we're trying to make sure that we're protecting the public. So there are lots of times when we can come together to think about, okay, let's call on a particular company or companies to understand exactly how they're doing what they're doing to safeguard the public. So there's ideas exchanged on the prevention side, the education side, and also on the enforcement side.
Yeah, and I was thinking, for example, recently a coalition of attorneys general across the states filed a collective action, I would say, against the federal government with respect to fair housing guidance and standards regarding state agencies, the FAP agencies. And so that kind of leadership that we've seen from you and other attorney generals, we see as an important opportunity that may be useful in the AI space as well. One thing that we've also seen, though, on the national landscape, in the national efforts from the federal government, is an effort to push back against states. And there have been these efforts to advance the notion of federal preemption of the law in this area of regulating AI. And I want to ask you kind of your thinking about kind of that interaction between state and the feds, and how, when necessary and appropriate, you think it's how the states push back on that. So I wanted to get your thinking on the preemption efforts from the federal level that we've seen.
Yeah, that's particularly concerning, right? Because as states, we know our folks best when it comes to what whether it's protecting consumers, protecting kids, protecting whomever it is. We know what regulations and what tools and things we need to do to make sure that that's done properly. So there's a lot of, I think, really fantastic and wonderful areas where if the federal government is working the way it should to protect all of us, and they're setting the standard, we can work together and do that. And that's here in this bucket. And then if they're not doing that, then states have to step up and do even more, right? And that's here in this bucket. But then when they try to stop states from doing what it takes to protect, that's over here, right? And that's where we are, right? And that's the worst case scenario, when you're not able to even do what you can individually in each of your states to make sure that you're taking your own concerns into account to make sure that you're keeping everyone protected. So when you have preemption, we are strongly opposed to that. And also the reasons why it's such a dangerous area, right, is consumers are protected and children are possibly harmed. And we see why the regulation here is important, right? We've seen with whether it's deep fakes or voice clones or people that are trying to use AI in a way to send graphic images, sexual images to children, or to inflict self-harm, or different chatbots that act in that way. We can see why it really is problematic and where the dangers lie, and why there is such a need for action in this space. And like I said before, when you're in a world where states can't even do that on their own, and the preemption of that, that's really problematic. So again, a bipartisan effort to push back on what was the proposal for the moratorium on states' ability to regulate this was something that we joined, and we think very strongly that we need to have a voice here.
That's terrific. Let me ask you, you mentioned, kind of the learning process and this is clearly a, kind of a steep learning curve, I think, for most in this area because the technology is advancing so quickly. What are the ways in which your office is, I'll say, getting its arms around what the challenges are in the AI space that you all will need to address?
So like with anything else, right? In all the different areas, I think back to when I started out of college. My first job was with the Drug Enforcement Administration. I was an intelligence analyst. And at the time, pagers were really popular. Dating myself a bit, but I had pagers, and we had pagers for work, and people who were looking to violate the law in different ways. We're using pagers in different ways, right? So you had that, and then it turned into a cell phone, maybe a flip phone, and then it turned into the smartphones that we have now. And you always kind of stay abreast of that technology. And again, the technology is again, can be really useful and really good. We think of our cell phones and what we can do with them, and pagers at the time, right? We're not talking about an entity that is necessarily bad. What we're thinking about is all the different ways that we want to make sure, again, to use it responsibly, to make sure that it's used responsibly. So what we're trying to do, much like all the different areas that we've looked at and regulated and worked through before, is to make sure that we learn as much as we possibly can, again, from other states or from again, folks in this room and people who we work with all of the time, to understand how to best use the technology, how to best make sure that that technology is used in a non-discriminatory way, and a way that is fair across the board. Making sure that our either investigators or prosecutors or those who are thinking about different ways where the laws and where the regulations possibly could be updated, understand, hearing from the public how it's being used, hearing from folks who have had negative and positive experiences. And we take all of that into account, which then informs how we can move forward. The Division on Civil Rights is one of the many areas and divisions in our department, is really a leader in this space. And our director is here. Our former director is here. We're really all in on this in New Jersey. And we lead in so many different ways within our state on these issues as well. And they started, before I joined just 2 months ago, a while back, they started an innovation lab for this purpose. An innovation lab which thinks about, how is AI being used in a discriminatory way so that we can understand those challenges? B, how can we possibly use it in a way to help the people of our state? How can we use it for our complaints, our intake, the things that come into us, to make sure that we're using it to make our state more efficient and to make our work more efficient? And C, and all of these are co-equal, right, is education and prevention too, free of charge to the people of our state, so that they understand how to use it. They understand some of the risks or the dangers that could come with it if it's not used responsibly, and in ways that we can hear from them, again, to inform our technology.
So your office has set up a lab to educate itself and figure out how to best use AI and protect against the harms or the risk, I should say, that it poses. So how does your office work with the other state agencies in addressing AI issues, AI technology, and this learning space?
Yeah, so again, we want to at all times try to exchange as many ideas as possible. We have an office within the state that's set up for responsible use of AI within the government and within the state government, and we leverage that and ask questions there. The tools that we have set up right now to use that are like a closed environment, right, with information that can be put in and sought from the tool. But we try to learn as much as we possibly can from those other state agencies. We're also the chief legal officer. The department and the AG serves as the chief legal officer for all the state agencies in the state of New Jersey. That's the way our structure and our model is set up. So under that authority as well, and that responsibility, we have to make sure that we're providing advice whenever possible.
Is your office the office that provides opinions and guidance at times if requested by the legislature? If there's proposed legislation in the space, would your office be the office that handle that, or are these?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Yeah, it really depends. We give legal advice to all of our client agencies, but it wouldn't necessarily fall on us for that.
For the legislature. So one of the things that we are very happy to see that New Jersey, the Attorney General's office has adopted, and the Civil Rights Division has adopted, is the guidance on algorithmic discrimination to enforce the New Jersey law against discrimination. And it really this guidance is the guidance that was adopted in January 2025, so it's fairly new. But we're happy to see that the state is recognizing that the pre-existing law, the civil rights laws and consumer protection laws, apply in a fundamental way to algorithmic discrimination. And if you could talk a little bit about how your office and the Civil Rights Division of the office are using and thinking about, or thinking about how to use those fundamental civil rights and consumer protection laws to provide protection and enforcement in this space.
Yeah, so New Jersey has the country's oldest law against discrimination, and the strongest one. We use it to make sure that people are protected, right? Just exactly what it's for. But sometimes when you take a look at how it's written, you want to make sure that people understand, and that we also add in it the rules and the definitions to make sure that as technology emerges, as there are different ways for discrimination to occur, that's captured, so that we can A, educate the public about what their rights are, and B, have the tools at our disposal to be able to use it to then hold actors accountable. So the guidance here is for disparate impact and for actions that have a disparate impact. That's now, with our new rules, baked into that law against discrimination. That's always been there, that we've always used, but that people understand that is a piece of it. And there's the education piece on this as well, so that when the Division on Civil Rights folks are going out to talk about it, that they understand this disparate impact, this in housing, in however it may be, however people are affected by it, they understand that this law protects you. It's not a new law, right? It's not a new concept. It's just that this is now covered because this is where we are technology. Same with the Consumer Fraud Act. The Consumer Fraud Act is quite strong, and it has so many different aspects of it, whether it's the penalties or forfeiture or injunctive relief. We have a wide range of options under our Consumer Fraud Act, and making sure that people understand that this is a tool that can be used and that has been used is really important.
Yeah, and that the disparate impact, and we just had the panel on disparate impact right before us. The fact that you all have also leaned in with guidance on disparate impact is really terrific. One of the concerns that we have, I would say, from the civil rights community, as we have seen the reality of the current administration pulling back on civil rights enforcement, and specifically on disparate impact, and in the fair housing space in particular, I mean, probably, I'll say writ large, but specifically in the fair housing space. And I wonder whether you all have, seen any increase in, folks reaching out to the state as a new avenue or an open avenue, since we see the retreat from the federal government in this space, and if you all have had to react in any way, or maybe that may still be something anticipated in terms of the retreat from the federal government in the enforcement area.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is true of this area as well as many different areas where there may have been multiple places where people can go for recourse, for help, for just someone knowing that they're on their side to really work toward and protect their rights. As we see the federal government stepping back from this, we really have always done this as the state, but now even more so are maybe seen as the primary place where people can have their voice heard and there can be action taken to protect them. So we are definitely seeing that.
Great. And let me ask you, you have such a deep background in law enforcement and in enforcing criminal statutes. Do you see a role for the criminal law in the AI space at all? I know I didn't share this as one of my questions, but it strikes me as I'm talking to you because I see that deep criminal justice background and wonder if there is, if you see that as part of the landscape in the AI enforcement area.
I mean, look, again, anytime there's someone who's trying to harm somebody else, and whatever tool or technique they use to do so, all tools are at our disposal, right? So I think from, the work of our department, and we do have such broad authority in New Jersey. There's criminal, there's civil, there's regulatory and enforcement power. We always want to think about the broad range of tools that we have at our disposal, not just for enforcement, but also for the prevention and for the education that we can do. But if there is someone who decides to take any type of technology, whether it's AI or something else, to use that to exploit another person, then we're going to think about what options we have,
including the criminal ones. So you mentioned in your AI lab, you all are also looking at ways that your office might be able to use AI to enhance its operations. And I wonder if there's anything you can share about whether you all have identified opportunities or ways to utilize AI to help enforce the laws, and particularly in the fair housing, fair lending, consumer protection space.
Yeah, in a few different examples. One, generally, right, when we think about process and procedure, I don't necessarily always think that people think of government as like, we have the most efficient ways to do X, Y, Z, or whatever it may be, right? I mean, that's just historically maybe not how you think about it. So thinking about ways that we can be more efficient, again, in taking in information from people in our complaint systems and making sure that we're getting as much in as we possibly can to then help as many people as we possibly can. But then the other piece of this is thinking about how to use AI to identify discriminatory practices, to be able to identify what is happening, and do it in a more efficient way across the board. That's something that we're thinking about a lot, so that we can then root out more of the discriminatory practices that are happening.
Yeah, so I mean, I feel like for most states, I mean, one of the speakers earlier in the conference said that for a lot of companies, and I assume states are in the same place, we're at the front end of this in terms of trying to figure out how we might build AI and use AI to our advantage. I assume for states and state law enforcement agencies and attorney general's offices that it is the same there. You're at the very beginning of it. And I wonder what kind of tools do you think you need in order to figure out how best to move forward in this space, whether it's the proposal of new laws, whether it's new staff that can actually utilize the AI. What types of tools do you think states and state actors like you need in order to be able to move forward effectively in the AI space?
Yeah, I think it's all those things you mentioned. I think most important to this or any type of work that we do, it's getting the right people in the room who have all of the different areas that they work and the space that they work so that we can understand it best. I find that there's really no substitute, regardless of the topic, to make sure that, much like your symposium is doing, right, is bringing all the different people from all the areas and sectors that work in this space so that we can all understand it from each other's perspective and also understand kind of all of the different pieces that come into it. So whether that's regulators, whether it's people who work solely in law enforcement, whether it's people who work in the industry or advocates or civil rights agencies, I think understanding each of those pieces helps us determine what tools we need, because there may be some software or something like that you could use, but understanding how that would work or how it could be implemented is not as, I think, effective as understanding it from all the different perspectives of the stakeholders that we have, which are all of those folks and those entities that I just mentioned. We have to think about all of that in the work that we do as a state in particular, because that's who we ultimately represent.
So when I think about how you bring individuals and those entities, I would say, when I listed the hierarchy, I had the federal government and the states, but then you get to the cities and the counties and the individuals. How do you bring those into to make sure that their experience is incorporated into the thinking and the activities of your office? How do they get involved in that process?
We're out there. As you mentioned, we have over 8,000 people that work for the department. So how it works in New Jersey is we're out there all the time, whether it's through listening sessions, whether it's through informal meetings or formal meetings. We're constantly gathering feedback. When we do our education sessions, we sometimes learn more than what we're putting out there, right? Because you hear how people are experiencing things. But when it comes to all the different levels of government and all the different levels that we have in the state, we're very fortunate. It's a large by number, right? 9.5 million people, but we have quite a network of communication set up throughout the state on many different levels when it comes to the government entities that share information and ideas all of the time. So we do it by doing the hard work of listening, right? There's no substitute for that. You can't have just an email address that says drop your comments here. Like, you have to have people out in the field and listening all of the time. So we just do it by like the hard work of getting out there and listening all the time, and also giving ideas before we roll something out. We try to, is this the best way to do it? This is what we're thinking about, and bringing stakeholders into the room to work through it with us.
Okay, and for my last question, I'll ask you, from where you sit, what is your biggest fear and what's your best hope in this space with respect to AI that you think about for your tenure as Attorney General?
So one thing we talked about before is preemption, of not being able to do this the way that we would want to do it, and the way that we know how we can protect, and whatever that may be, the protection that we have and that we think is important for our own. So I think that's a huge piece of this, making sure that as State Attorney General, I'm able to protect the people of our state the right way, and making sure that our laws and our regulations are ones that we can continue to enforce. And my hope is that in just all of the different ways that we've seen innovation make our states and our country better, that we can use that in that way as well, but doing so in ways that reflect our values and our biases, right? So just like a human, if we're having a conversation or if I want to bring somebody onto our team, I want to make sure that they reflect our values and that person reflects our values and not the bias that we may have. We want to make sure that AI or any other technology that we're using has the same approach that we would expect from human interaction.
Great, thank you. Our time is up, but I want to thank you for participating in this conference, for the listening ear that I can tell you are providing on this issue and how it intersects with civil and human rights. It is your office and the state attorney generals across the country are critical to the network that we work with to try to ensure that AI ultimately is responsibly governed and human-centered. So we thank you for your role, for your staff that's come and helped and engaged fully in the process, and we look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.